How is it going, everyone? It's Caleb Limited here, and today we are going to be talking about another Star Wars movie. We are going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, the thing about this movie is that this is actually the first Star Wars movie that I remember seeing in theaters. I may have seen Episode 1 in theaters, and I believe I did, but I was too young to really remember it. This one, however, I actually remember very fondly. I remember we went to a movie theater in the mall. That was back when malls still had movie theaters. I don't know if they still do it or not anymore. I haven't seen a movie theater in a mall in a very long time, but that's where we went to see it. And I remember watching this movie and absolutely loving it. And to this day, I still love this movie, even though it's not my favorite Star Wars movie. And you can definitely notice some issues with it as you watch it, mainly just with the actual images and the actual CGI of this movie. There's definitely some dated CGI in it. It's kind of interesting because it struggles with the same thing Episode 1 did, where there's some CGI that even today holds up fantastically. It looks great. And then there's other moments where you see some of the CGI and you're just like, wow, that has aged horrifically. You know? One of the things that I really noticed in this one was the CGI of certain characters like Dexter. I always loved Dexter's Diner. That is one of my favorite locations in all Star Wars. I love that setting. I love that character. However, you can definitely tell the CGI has dated on Dexter quite horribly. Dexter does not look as good as I remember him looking. But I still love Dexter. I still love this location. I love a lot of the locations in this movie, too. You get a lot of cool planets in this one. You get a Geonosian, which is like where the main battle in the climax of this movie takes place. But you also have Kamino, and I've always loved Kamino. Very mysterious, cool planet. And there you have just a lot of great settings. You have Coruscant, but you get to see kind of like the very lower, not the lowest levels of Coruscant, but you get to see a lower level of Coruscant where you just see kind of like the nightlife going on in the nightlife of Coruscant, and it's really cool to see. And you get some awesome chases in this movie as well. The very first scene, well, not the first scene, but the first chase that you get in this movie is when the Jedi start chasing Zam Wesell. And that's a really fun chase scene, really action-packed, and really this movie has a lot of good action in it. It does have some lulls at moments, you know, it definitely slows down in some areas, especially whenever it gets the Anakin stuff, whenever Anakin's talking to Padme and they're trying to develop the relationship there. One of my favorite parts about this movie is actually when Anakin gets to go back to Tatooine in search of his mother Shmi. Whenever he gets to go back to Tatooine after he keeps having these nightmares of his mother dying, which kind of plays into his whole prophetic ability in the Force, how he can see the future before the future actually happens. I like when he goes back to Tatooine and he's looking for his mom. Not only does it show that he still cares about his mom despite the Jedi Order trying to get rid of all emotions, which, you know, I always thought was kind of weird how the Jedi Order wants you to forget everything. Like, they want you to basically be a husk of your former self. I always found that kind of interesting because being a Jedi is almost... It's very different than how a normal human would react. So I always found that kind of just interesting in general, how Anakin really didn't care too much and he just always gave into his emotions. And again, you could view that as more as the Chancellor also manipulating him into it as well, because the Chancellor kept basically filling him with dreams of grandeur. You have some new characters in this, with also some returning characters, of course. You have Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan Kenobi, but you also get the introduction of Hayden Christensen as a returning character of Anakin Skywalker. You have Padme Amidala, of course, back in this as well, and Chancellor Palpatine is still in there skeeving and kind of putting ideas into Anakin's mind about how he has a lot more potential than the rest of the Jedi. He's basically teaching Anakin the opposite of everything that the Jedi are telling him. Like, it was actually kind of interesting to see on this rewatch, just seeing Palpatine kind of basically go completely against the Jedi Order and immediately tell Anakin, oh, just, yeah, your feelings, you should definitely give in to those. So I actually really like seeing, you know, the different, like, Anakin getting different information and trying to process it, and he's just having problems because obviously he's trained to be a Jedi, but he has normal human emotions, and then the Chancellor, who is supposed to be a super wise person, is telling him, yeah, go ahead, go for it, just give in to your feelings, everything will work out, you know, you're going to be the strongest Jedi ever, you know, you need that power. And it's just like, okay, yep, he's already starting his manipulation. So I definitely enjoyed that, though, seeing that, you know, relationship between Palpatine and Anakin starting to grow in this one. So that was really good. And you do get another new character in this. You get Jango Fett. And in my opinion, Jango Fett is probably the coolest bounty hunter in the Star Wars movies. I like Jango Fett more than Boba Fett personally. I love Jango Fett. He's an awesome character. I always loved the Bounty Hunter game that had Jango Fett in it, and you get to kind of see the like more of the backstory of Jango Fett. Unfortunately, I believe that is no longer canon; it's now Legends. They really should make that canon though, because that was such a great backstory for Jango Fett. It filled in a lot of the blanks, and it just gave you a really well done character. And it even showed you how Darth Tyrannus, aka Count Dooku, met Jango Fett to start the cloning process on Kamino. So I really think they should make that game canon, because it really connects a lot of the dots that you're kind of missing in between the movies. But either way, Jango Fett's still awesome in this movie, though. You get to see him actually kill a Jedi on screen, and to see a non Force user kill a Jedi is pretty impressive, and I always thought that was really cool. I wish Jango Fett would have made it through more movies, but at least he had clones to kind of carry on his legacy, I guess, And the clones of him are awesome. Obviously, they're a lot different than Jango Fett and his personality, but they do end up being really awesome characters, and I really love the introduction of the clone troopers. And everything on Kamino is really cool, too. I mean, the aliens there, the Kaminoans, and just Obi-Wan's visit there, and the actual fight between Obi-Wan and Jango Fett was really good. There's actually a fight in space, and during the fight in space, you get to see Jango Fett's Slave 1 versus Obi-Wan in the Jedi Starfighter. And I absolutely love this part of the movie because it shows how good sound design in Star Wars is. So many great just audio clips in this movie, especially when you hear the seismic charges go off from Jango Fett's Slave 1. I always thought those were the coolest thing whenever I was a kid, I still think they're really cool. How they explode and they don't make a sound until things actually start, like, the Force starts pushing outwards. I always love that. It's just such a cool weapon. And seeing Jango Fett and Slave 1 actually do something in this movie compared to, they didn't really do a whole lot with Boba Fett in the original trilogy was really nice. So I'm definitely happy with that, and I think that everything with Jango Fett still holds up really, really well in this. And, of course, you do have the other Sith in this one, Count Dooku. Count Dooku, I have always thought, was a very underrated Sith, because he is kind of a little bit in the gray area. Yes, he is a Sith, but you don't get the same hate from him that you get from other Sith. You can tell he doesn't really hate the Jedi. You never see his eyes turn orange from the hate. You never really see him give into hate. He's always very calm, collected. It's almost like he can still control his feelings rather well compared to a lot of other Sith. And it's just very interesting to see this kind of like Sith Lord who still somewhat cares about the Jedi. You can tell it's almost like he still cares, and yeah, he is kind of manipulating them at the same time. Like, he cares, and he's literally telling them the truth at one point, and he is manipulating people, He tells Obi-Wan that who the true Dark Lord of the Sith is, and that he's over the Senate, and that's completely honest, but he is telling Obi-Wan that to manipulate him into joining him. He wants Obi-Wan to join the Sith. So it's a very interesting character. I've always found him very interesting, and I really like that character. I still think that he's criminally underrated. And, I mean, Christopher Lee, he one of the best actors of all time. Absolutely love him. And his portrayal of a Sith Lord, especially Count Dooku, is just so amazing. He does such a great job of making that character just feel so wise, super intelligent, but also, like, very manipulative and mysterious at the same time. I really, really like that character. So there'll never be another Christopher Lee, for sure. I love that character, and he did a fantastic job with it. And, of course, you get to see Yoda do some lightsaber fighting for the first time on screen. I always like this. They obviously had to use CGI for Yoda, but the CGI on Yoda actually doesn't look too bad. I didn't really mind that. And, I mean, how are you going to have Yoda do a lightsaber fight without using CGI? You just can't really do it. And I always thought that they did a great job with Yoda in this movie. I love the lightsaber fight between him and Count Dooku. Again, another very underrated lightsaber fight, and I really enjoy that. One other thing I got to talk about real quick with this movie is the actual Geonosian arena. I love this scene, not only because you finally get to see a lot of Jedi do some actual combat, you finally get to see a bunch of Jedi just come together and, fight and try to fight these droids and everything, and not only do you get the clones finally showing up to help the Jedi take on the droids, but you also have some of the coolest creatures in Star Wars. You have a Reek, you have an Acklay, and you have a Nixu. And I have always loved these monsters. And everything around the Geonosian arena, the whole setup for it, when they bring out Padme and Anakin, and they finally kind of like solidify the relationship between Padme and Anakin, and Obi-Wan's still, kind of like cracking jokes, even though they're literally about to be served up on the chopping block. Like, everything about this is just great. It feels like pure Star Wars, and it's one of my favorite moments in all of Star Wars, especially the prequel series. I love this moment. It's just such a cool arena style, seeing all these stupid Geonosians all get excited over them, trying to kill the Jedi and everything, and then obviously the animals, basically it backfiring and the animals killing some of the Geonosians instead. Always thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, I really like this. I like this scene. I like the arena. I love the creatures in it. I always wanted action figures of all the creatures growing up. The only one I actually had was the Nixu. I had a figure of the Nixu growing up, and I absolutely loved that thing. But I always wanted the Reek and the Acolyte too, just because, who doesn't love Star Wars monsters, right? You had the Rancor in the original trilogy, and that thing was super famous because everyone loved it, and that's how I was with these three monsters in Attack of the Clones. And of course, right after this leads into the beginning of the Clone Wars, and you actually get the Clone Wars animated stuff in between episodes 2 and 3. And this is basically the whole start of the Clone Wars, and I absolutely love this movie. It's fantastic. I can't really say enough good things about it. I was just kind of hitting some of my favorite points about this movie and some of the things that I noticed while I was watching it again. But overall, it's still a really fun movie. Fantastic sound design. I still enjoy the acting. I know some people used to give some of the characters hard times, but I actually think that the characters and everything are very well written. Especially, again, I can be a little bit biased because I did grow up with this, so this is what the characters I'm used to. This is how I'm used to them acting. But for me, I'm very happy with all of the characters in this. I love this movie. Love the acting. Love the character development. Love the settings, the actual look of everything, the starships. Everything about this movie looks fantastic, and it feels like Star Wars. And it's just very fun to go back and watch every now and then. And I'm glad I did. Even though some of the CGI is still a bit messy, and there's probably, I think it's safe to say there's some overuse of CGI, but you could say that about really any of the prequels. They definitely overused a lot of CGI, but still, even then, I still really, really think this movie looks pretty good in most places. And I think I'm going to leave it there. But thank you guys for watching. Go check out Attack of the Clones. It's a really good Star Wars movie. While it may not be my favorite, it's still really good, and I'll always have fond memories of it. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.